The Seattle Storm are sending Jewell Loyd to the Las Vegas Aces in a blockbuster three-team trade that moves Kelsey Plum to the LA Sparks. That's according to ESPN. As part of the deal, Seattle receives the second pick in this year's WNBA draft from LA in exchange for the Storm's number 9 pick, while the Aces also receive the 13th pick, a second-round selection from the Sparks. Loyd is a 6-time All-Star and 2-time champ with Seattle, while Plum is a 3-time All-Star with 2 titles of her own out in Las Vegas. Loyd to Vegas, Plum to LA. Just how does this maybe impact the landscape of the Western Conference? And I kind of want to also throw in the league as a whole, getting some of these big pieces now in new places.
We have been hearing for a little while the reporting of Annie Costabile at the Chicago Sun-Times, as well as Roberta Rodriguez with Beta Basket. We've been hearing that Jewell Loyd, especially after the investigation with the Seattle Storm, was likely on the move. And then, of course, Kelsey Plum was cored by the Aces, though she was considered and still is technically considered one of the top draws in free agency as an unrestricted. 2 names like that, 2 Olympians, just won gold in Paris. They are going to, as you said, draw a lot of assets. And when you see a 3-team trade, obviously this was about as many teams as possible, but especially the Seattle Storm and the Las Vegas Aces being able to get value.
This reminds me a lot of you. Like, you say it's not really about me. It's not about me. And she knows how her privilege has gotten her to that point. And also, like, she's good at basketball, but like, she understands her privilege. It's like what pushes her over the top, in a sense. It reminds me a lot of you. And I mean, that's a
I think what we have seen in the WNBA, especially with the last collective bargaining agreement that the league is still under, though negotiating right now, we've seen a lot more player autonomy and movement. And that makes things really exciting.
Go back to the Aces just very briefly, because you talked about how they were trying to get that 3-peat, but instead now maybe seeking to compete for their 3rd championship in the last 4 years, and certainly looking to build that core around A'ja Wilson. But just what does Jewell Loyd kind of add to now what the Aces are trying?
Lloyd, again, has a very similar skill set in a lot of ways to Kelsey Plum. I think of players that can play that number 2 guard in particular, maybe have the ball in their hands a time or two. But with Jewell Loyd, her execution from the corner is lethal. And with Jewell Loyd, we saw that even at the Olympics, there was some controversy there with how she was utilized, or in fact, how she was not utilized by head coach Cheryl Reeve for Team USA. And then again, there were a few things going on with Seattle, and we saw a little bit of her productivity and specifically her efficiency dip. People thought they could be in contention to over and usurp the Houston Comets for that 4-peat. Of course, that didn't come to pass. The New York Liberty are champions, let's not forget. But I think it's just a little bit of a different culture change. And I think with that, it means that Kelsey Plum, if she does go to LA, will be utilized for some of her experience and her leadership.
She will be paired alongside last year's number 2 overall pick, Cameron Brink, who was off to a fantastic rookie year before that season-ending injury. I mean, that's a 3-time All-Star. We talk about 2 titles, but just looking at her joining that, what kind of expertise, what kind of knowledge, what can that really do for, I don't want to use this, but what kind of spark can that be for the Sparks out there in LA? I had to use it.
I think you're right. With Cameron Brink coming back, hopefully very healthy from injury, as you mentioned, she was a dynamic force for that LA team. I think it's the overall organization and some of the things, again, that this is a legacy franchise. The Los Angeles Sparks played in the first ever WNBA basketball game. And again, we've seen other teams just build a little bit more infrastructure around their play. I heard a time or two the phrase hybrid rebuilds come into play. They have a new coach. They are going to have now, as has been reported, a new player in Kelsey Plum. So I think the leadership from Plum, and I think maybe the reset for Kelsey Plum, being in a new environment, maybe taking on a different role, because she's coming from the Las Vegas Aces.